Okay, so let's jump in the time machine and go back kind of to the April-May window. Well, actually, let me precede that a little bit. Housing markets were in Utah were going gangbusters at just about every price level prior to the pandemic. Going into March, part of the state's sort of sizzling economy. Demand for housing was very high. We were had this sort of perennial debate about affordability. And then came March, as a lot of stories say. And give us a little bit of description of what that kind of March, April, May window looked like on the five counties that encompass the Wasatch Front in terms of housing.
Yeah, like most of the world, it was a lot of trepidation, right? We were entering such uncharted territory as human beings, that when you're talking about making a move that's as big as and important in your life as real estate, there just were, I felt like everybody's head had question marks around,
Mm,
right? Surrounding their heads. So March was a lot of March numbers, or obviously there's a lag there, right? And so a lot of those closings came from February, sales produced in February. But as you see in April and May's numbers, what was happening in March is just a lot of, I'm not sure what's happening here. And what
mm.
does this mean? And is the world ending, or is this going to be a 6 week thing and we're back to normal? So there was a lot of pause buttons being pushed.
Yeah, and that was buyers and sellers alike.
Hmm.
And it also it was, if I may say, rather impressive to watch your industry climb a very steep learning curve with regard to just what all this meant in terms of home showing. Can you talk a little bit about not so much a shift to video, but just a sort of a more four square focus on video home tours and that sort of thing? How did the industry adjust?
I think you nailed it on the head. There was a very steep and quick adaptation to a new normal, and things like having sanitation stations at the front of a home. When you first walk in, having masks and hand sanitizer, and all the lights already being turned on and saying don't touch any of the light. All the doors are already open. Virtual open houses. Our MLS was one of the first in the country, and only in the country, to very quickly allow for a link on our MLS listings that, instead of going to the date and time of a live open house, it linked directly to a Facebook Live event or a YouTube link or something for a virtual open house. 3D Matterport videos have always been utilized here and there, but certainly sporadically. And that became, for me and my business practice, a must. Every single listing had a 3D kind of dollhouse walkthrough where you could virtually walk through the home,
Mm.
doing one party showings where just the agent was there, and you use Marco Polo as a video resource to do a live walkthrough with your clients, but
Mm.
it's through video. I mean, it was very quick that we said, real estate has to go on. People
Mhm.
have to buy and sell and transact real estate. And many times it's not just, ooh, I feel like moving. It's, I have to do this. So
Mhm.
how do we still make this happen and do it safely, right?
Right, right, right. And those initial county health degrees all defined the real estate industry as essential workers.
On the
And
Wasatch Front,
on the Western
yes.
Front, that's right, that's right. And so you kept on going, and then as uh, May gave way to June, we started to see something kind of dramatic happen in the market. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I talk about in this April and May kind of pause button that was being pushed. I it never halted. We never
Mm.
saw this like just slam against the door halt, right? But we just saw a lot of like, I'm gonna just kind of feel this out for a week or two. And obviously one of the biggest counteracts that the government has to a recession or an economy that's falling are interest rates and how we use interest rates to bolster the economy. And so here we had what finally felt to a lot of buyers like, wow, I don't have the competition I had 2 months ago in January or February. I'm going to actually take advantage of these interest rates and go get into the market that isn't as gangbusters as it was a month ago and have some breathing room. Well, everybody caught on, right? And you have interest rates that are at 50-year historic lows. And, you know, suddenly we had way more demand than we've had in the past. And we've had a supply issue for years. So it just compounded.
Right. And so the 30-year, I believe, is hovering well below the 30-year mortgage, well below 3%. A big incentive for even lower in a lot of cases. And just to be clear, that sort of June bounce was really kind of up and down price sectors of the market, everything from luxury to basic sort of entry-level affordable homes. Were getting lots of offers, and if I recall, your shop did some pretty significant business that month.
Yeah, it's wild to see the total numbers. July, we had a historic month. We sold over 2,000 homes,
wow.
Which had not been ever done. You know, that was the MLS record, if you will.
Yeah, the biggest July on history, the biggest July in history of the state. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is, you know, you talk about 3 months of declining home sales with COVID. We've almost erased that decline. So it looks as though at the end of 2020, we will actually have surpassed 2019's numbers, even with a 3-month decline.
Wow, that's astonishing. And there's, you know, once we start to get past that reactive bounce where people were kind of jumping in thinking that they didn't have any competition in kind of the June effect, there was there started to take over some kind of interesting kind of pandemic factors, if you will, in terms of demand in this market. You know, a lot of people kind of coming in to the market from big cities elsewhere. Maybe people that had a tie to the area that were buying here, but then also a lot of movement within the state too, where people were looking for new space. We talked about home offices before we came on the air. Talk about demand that after that kind of rebound.
Yeah, if you think about what your home means to you, right? And the decisions that people make in how they choose a house. All of those things got kind of shaken up. If you think about a commute is the number one driver for choice of where you purchase a home. How long does it take me to get to work or where I do my life? People who maybe never in a million years considered the need for a home office or a home school situation. Maybe somebody who before loved the vibrancy of downtown and being in a condo building with lots of activity and people and whatever, suddenly that gets shaken up. So almost every piece of decision making that we look at factors and why we choose the house that we do got shifted. And so suddenly there was this surge of the question being asked, is this the right house for me? And could I maybe take advantage of moving further into the suburbs out of more highly dense areas because I no longer have a commute? Things of that nature. If my kids are going to do online school, do I need them to be in this school that I was making a home location decision based on this particular school? Well, if I've moved to online, maybe I don't have to make that decision anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting to see this kind of societal shift gradually take hold when people sort of realize what not being tethered to work, not being tethered to school really means. You've got people that have moved within the state as a result.
Oh, yeah.
And then you've also got this phenomenon of people, maybe people that are a little bit more affluent, not necessarily abandoning, but kind of reappraising their decision to live in large cities, especially on the West Coast. And that's kind of lent a different appeal, if you will, to some of what Utah's always had to offer. In terms of people wanting access to recreation and is proximity to open space and recreation and that sort of thing starting to be more of a selling point as you show homes?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been seeing an in-net migration to Utah for many years, right? With the Silicon Slopes, and we've been seeing this migration to Utah with businesses and tech companies and all of that. And one of the reasons, as those companies are interviewed, why Utah, it's our quality of life and our recreation and green space and proximity to the mountains. I recently had somebody move here from Denver, which to me felt like we're so similar. And he said, no, Denver, we're 2 hours to our ski hills. Here I'm 20 minutes because of, commute and congestion and things of that nature. So we have seen what all of us who are native to Utah or have lived here for a long time have kind of taken for granted really just shine in the midst of this. We have these core values and high emphasis on recreation and quality of life and all of these things. Now, when people, like you said, you no longer have that tether to a job, maybe in Silicon Valley or wherever. Now you're making real decisions for your personal quality of life. Utah's at the top. It just is.
And give us a sense of where the hot spots are along the 4-county area. Part of my point being that all 5 counties in the Wasatch Front MLS seem to be doing, seem to be beating last year's numbers. Where are the hot spots?
Man, that's a tough one. I mean, truly up and down the Wasatch Front, right? I mean, we know Lehigh, Bluffdale, Draper, kind of right around where the prison site is projected to move and become a once in a lifetime opportunity of taking advantage of that land. People see the future value in that. So this area out in the southern tip, right, connection between Utah and Salt Lake counties is a hot spot for sure. But you can go from Provo, Linden area, all the way to Salt Lake, and you have growth in all of those areas. What's interesting too, though, is when we talk about the affordability issue, right? You're now pushing out at every angle. So we're seeing growth in every single city.
Yeah. In that year and a half to 2 years leading up to the pandemic, we had seen Tooele County, for example, develop as sort of a place where people can find a bargain. They get a little fed up with not finding what they want, in the more, further east. And there were other kind of niche, not niche markets, but less frequented parts of the market that had been livening up already. That's just even more pronounced now. Let's say from the perspective of a buyer right now, somebody that's looking in the market, what are they likely to see as they start to go out and look? What's their experience like these days?
Yeah, as a buyer, there's never been a time that was it was so important to really have some actual guidance through it to navigate the market, right? If you look at the average days on market, we're probably less than 10, 7 days. And that's the only reason it's even that many is because people are taking offers for 2 or 3 or 5 days and then negotiating and finally going under contract, right? In terms of how many days it takes to actually obtain an offer on a property in the Salt Lake Valley, it's a day, right? It's 2 days. And so as a buyer, it's so incredibly important that they're prepared, that they have things in place like pre-approvals, proof of funds, things of that nature, understand what they're stepping into, because having the proper expectations. If you think that you're going to go out and kind of lowball offers, you're going to get beat up a bit. So it's, you're going out and you're competing against multiple offers in almost every scenario.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there again, that 2 or 3 years prior to the pandemic, we had watched as median home prices in each of the counties and along the Wasatch Front as a whole continued to climb each quarter, with numbers that if you'd lived around here, for 15, 20 years, you're just kind of scratching your head that a home like that would sell as high. Should we expect median prices to continue to climb?
Well, I mean, I think that's a supply and demand, like economics 101 question, right? If we look at the facts and what's driving the current real estate market, I don't see any reason that goes down. We've talked about interest rates being low. We've talked about the influx of people. 46% of our demand comes just from our own kids growing up and moving out. And because Utah has a relatively thriving economy, even in a recession like we're in today because of COVID, they're getting jobs. And so they're buying homes. Utah has one of the highest home ownership levels in the country. We value that as a state. So our kids grow up mostly valuing that. And so when you look at the supply and demand economics of our market, we can't build fast enough. And that's even being tightened even more with supply costs skyrocketing. I mean, lumber is, up like 178% or something like that. We're running out of land to build, just all of the factors that go, well, we can't make up the inventory through just building it, right? And the demand isn't going anywhere. There's nothing telling us that people are going to stop moving to Utah. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Interest rates, I don't have a crystal ball, and I have long given up predicting this year, but I don't see any reason why they would go up, right? And so if our supply doesn't go up or our supply or demand doesn't go down, we're going to keep the pressure on the market, and therefore prices are going to continue to appreciate.
Yeah, you're probably hearing a lot of the same reports that I am, that home building is on a very steep kind of aggressive curve right now. But again, we've been in this situation where construction costs and labor costs and all that sort of thing, the things that contribute to the final home price, have been rising. There's no reason to think that's going to change either. So is your, it'd be a fair question to add to that last point that you as a realtor are seeing inventories kind of tighten, and when you've not really got the products to the homes to show out there that you might like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is this creating any kind of ancillary upward pressure on the condo market? I understand condominiums are seeing a little bit of a kind of a price lift also.
It's interesting because of the affordability crisis that we've been in Utah for the last 5 years or so, as it just gets tighter and tighter, which I want to make a comment about that when we circle back around. But condos and townhouses actually were projected to appreciate at double the speed or appreciation as single family homes, simply because that's where the affordability lied, right? Mm-hmm. Condos have seen a bit of a beat up in the last couple months, dependent on location because of density.
Right.
Because of COVID. I think that's short-lived. And it's been thwarted a little bit and counteracted by affordability. I just sold a condo. I closed on it today, and we had 12 offers, 2 cash. So condos are selling. But it's been an interesting dynamic. People really ask the question, do I want to live that close to my neighbor right now?
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of condos are located in more dense areas, and by their own definition, they're kind of dense.
If you have a common walkway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And so we haven't talked yet about you're one of the top brokers at Summit Sotheby's, which has an interesting specialty in the luxury end of housing markets. And I've just spent some time up in Park City, as I shared earlier, and we're seeing a very interesting luxury trend up in Summit and Wasatch counties that you've been a little bit a part of. Tell us what's going on up there.
Yeah, again, it's being native to Utah. I think, oh, my sweet Park City, that
Not anymore.
but yeah, so people are catching on. I mean, anybody who has spent any time in Utah loves going to Park City, whether you're on the front or the back, of Wasatch Range. Park City has its massive appeal in Main Street and the resorts, the world-class resorts that we have, and the affluent nature of the demographics and all the things. Park City School District is something that is incredibly sought after. So people are catching on, and the influx of money that is coming to Park City is insane. And whereas, you used to say where we kind of had this tale of two markets for a long time, where up to a certain point, it was this extreme seller's market. And then over at a certain point, it actually kind of the inventory balanced out a little bit. And it was more of a balanced market, in some cases, even a buyer's market. So we had this tale of two markets for a long time, and that's kind of gone away. You're seeing multiple offers and prices, or offers over asking price in the multi-million-dollar range. We haven't seen that before. So it's, and again, you want to talk, it's this influx, right?
Right.
I was actually just having a chat with one of my dear friends that sells a lot of real estate, in Park City. And the majority of her buyers this year have never seen the house until after they close in person, because they were staying home where they lived, but purchasing here to come. And it was all done electronically. So it's gangbusters up there right now.
Yeah, and interesting dynamic in that market. The Census Bureau statistic is that half of the homes in Summit County, at least, are second homes, and vacation homes often sit empty or rent on Airbnb. So it's kind of an interesting factor in home inventory up there. And I also, it's interesting. It sounds like a lot of people got, or a significant number of people got caught in March and April. We're out here for their spring break at their vacation property, and restrictions and lockdowns started happening on the east and the west coasts, and they decided to stay here. And as you and I both talked to buyers that kind of made the transition. They were kind of hanging out here, hoping to wait the pandemic out, and then thought, well, might as well home hunt for a while. And then we're seeing a lot of buyers that are kind of turning in that regard and shifting their primary residency here. It sounds like go ahead, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, and even again, within our own state, right? Again, if you were making a commute-based decision, and so you lived on the Wasatch Front based on a commute, but your lifestyle really would draw you, if you had the choice, to do the Wasatch back. Now maybe you have that choice because of the lack of having to commute. And so we're seeing that even just from the Wasatch Front to the Wasatch back, not just from out of state. Yeah.
Well, and I was looking at some MLS statistics that the million and above homes just on the Wasatch Front, on the 5-county area here, are also seeing something of a bump compared to last year. So it's a more kind of widespread buying phenomenon. So question: Where does this leave the would-be home buyer, the entry-level home buyer? We generate a lot of young people year upon year in this state. Big factor in our affordability picture is just sort of resident population growth. I hesitate to call them millennials because they're obviously not all millennials, but they face certain kind of financial challenges that previous generations did not. Is it a bleak picture in terms of availability of homes for an entry level buyer along the Wasatch Front, at least over the next 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, see, here's my take on it. And, call this Alicia Holdaway's opinion. But I am a data-driven person, frankly, and I like to make as logical of decisions as possible. And we were talking off air about, just the importance of understanding from a logical and data perspective what you're really getting into in the market before you ever start looking at homes, because then emotion really does take over. So when you ask, is it a bleak picture in terms of availability? Yeah, it is. Availability is tight, especially in those most affordable price ranges. The thing that I would encourage people to really look at is, interestingly enough, an index that we use in my world is the Housing Affordability Index, right? And it's really based on, does the median household income, can they afford the median price home, right? And what that looks like. Believe it or not, the Housing Affordability Index has increased by 18 points this year. And you look at price appreciation, you go, how could that possibly be the case? Interest rates. Your interest rate is your buying power, right? And, you may go, well, 6 months ago, I was looking at a $315,000 home that's now going to cost me $350,000 because of multiple offers and prices get pushed up or whatever. But that $35,000 gap isn't that significant when you look at, I'm only paying 3% mortgage for the 10 or 15 years that I live there. So housing affordability actually, in my opinion, and based on the data, has never been better, because the cost of purchasing a home and the payment you pay per month is lower based on your interest rate. And we know it's just a fact that a lot of wealth is built from home ownership, right? If you look at the net income, if you will, and net worth of homeowners versus renters, homeowners always have a higher net worth because, not always, mostly have a higher net worth because of that equity. Well, if we don't have any signs of that softening in Utah and our market going in the opposite direction and going downwards, then buying into the game, even though it's emotionally tough to be in the market right now, you're buying into that appreciation game.
Right.
So, I mean, I have a couple that I'm helping right now that bought 2 years ago as first-time home buyers. They're young, early 20s, and they now have $100,000 of equity to go into their next home, right? So yeah, is it tough on them? Sure. But they only got that equity because they bought into the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and another interesting thing, I mean, it seems strange to say this when you look at a $2 million home in downtown Park City, but most of our inventory stock at most price levels are relatively affordable compared to other urban markets. Even at the luxury end, you're getting more for what you pay than you would if you bought that equivalent property in, say, the Hamptons or someplace like that. So even though those prices look a little out of reach for some entry level buyers, our market is still relatively affordable compared to others.
Yep. Once again, one more factor to our demand, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to throw out a point you made earlier that in this environment of extreme kind of pressure and multiple offers, it really pays to have an expert on your side in terms of a realtor or a representative that has experience in the market. Is that accurate?
Yeah, obviously I'm biased, right? I mean, I've been selling real estate for 12 years. I've seen a lot of crazy things come through in offers. I know our contract backwards and forwards. I could tell you what's in section 17, and it gets people get creative in markets like this. And it's, again, that human desire to win can take over, and people just try to win but then the rubber hits the road and you're under contract, and now you're under a legally binding contract and you've got to perform. What does that mean? What does that look like? So from a selling and buying perspective, I could not imagine navigating this market without an expert on your side that knows that contract backwards and forwards.
Well, that's all we have time for, Alicia. Thank you so much. It's been really fascinating to pick your brain about the market. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony.
Okay.